Hi there, welcome back to Stellar Horizons Campaign Game Playthrough, episode 26. We are in the year 2105, starting with the build phase. Make sure to look at the designer's comments in the last video or two about, let's see here, I had a question. I'm just pointing here at an empty flyby box where the pirate used to be. He answered some questions. If you are in a flyby, you move in to a flyby box with a pirate. If you don't move, the pirate will not search for you. So you can just lay low and stand still and avoid the pirate. So that's an important note. All right, with that, let's move on to the build phases. And it's going to be real simple because nobody is buying anything. Everybody's got money. Russia and Asia don't have any launch vehicles on Earth right now, and the Americans do. But I'm not sure that anybody really needs anything right now. Everybody's crewed vehicles are mostly out. The Russians could launch one more, but we're already halfway through the decade. I think it makes more sense for them to let, and when I say one more, I mean they're one more from their max limit. So their support limit's 1, and I guess they're at 4 right now. So I don't think it's worth buying a launch vehicle and launching something just to maybe need to have to decommission it or pay a bunch of money for it. So with that, and the other thing is, I think now that we're getting close on the tech chart to the ability to buy technology points, I think banking money from decade to decade may be viable. And also, as we saw with the Americans earlier this decade with the space elevators technology, you can then just pay cash for CVs. Well, the Americans don't have any more CV5s. They do have some CV6s, which they don't have the technology for, but Russia and Asia may be wanting to bank some cash to either go to, buy a 5 or a 6 and build that at Earth for money instead of for resources. So those are all considerations. With that, let's go to the transfer box movements. American CV arrives back here. I may have mismanaged this a little bit. I was just considering having this one turn right back around now, this turn, plus add some resources for here. Between two crewed vehicles, they could accumulate enough supplies and then a little bit for a facility. They could both head back to Jupiter and get that base built at Jupiter, which is the Americans' plan right now. I've decided to actually hold off. I'm just going to let this one come back. I'm going to send another one out there with this. It's going to carry the stuff for the facility, the small mining facility, but it's going to go ahead and take the opportunity. Once the base is built, they won't be able to mine fuel there for the rest of the turn. So actually building the base later in the turn is better, and this one can go out there and it doesn't need to be, this will be our base builder. This one can go out there and do a little bit of mining and have some additional resources, and then once the base is built, they'll have accumulated enough fuel or maximized their stuff. So back to movement, we've got lots here. Orbiter, CV5, CV4, orbiter, just kind of spreading that out. Those guys to the one box. What do we got? Orbiter and a flyby here, the flyby train, and nothing in the inner system. So on to the Asians. Okay. Yeah, so what are the Asians doing? Well, we know what the Americans are doing. The Asians, I probably was going to build a settlement last turn, and maybe I didn't, or maybe I did. Anyway, I don't think it's going to be an issue. So the question is, they're going to spend a little more stuff. They could sell some ore once they get to 5, they can sell 6 ore. So if they want to accumulate money to turn into tech points, they can go in that direction. Anyway, this CV4 with the supplies, I think the best thing to do is just come back here and unload it. The only other option would be to take those 6 supplies. They could head out and build a base in the Jupiter system somewhere, but they can't do Jupiter proper. They don't have the base construction cost reduction sufficient to build it at Jupiter, so they'd have to pick a moon. You know, the likely target would be Europa, but it still has 4 things, so yeah, I'll talk myself out of doing anything like that right now. So the 6 supplies get unloaded. This CV3, well, if they want more ore to sell, this CV3 is going to come over here and just take that opportunity. They've got their CV5 here. It's going to continue to explore. They've got a CV4. All right, so they've got lots of supplies, the Asians. They don't have a lot of fuel. So I think with that, CV4 is going to come in here to Jupiter and mine some fuel. The Asian orbiter also going to come in to Jupiter and just be available to target any of these locations. Orbiter here and a probe. Just going to go right up. Engine check roll for that orbiter. Okay, starting off slow. A 6, still not a problem. Okay, this orbiter and probe. 91, no problem. Flyby, we'll take care of them. That looks like all of the Asians' movements. Next up, the Americans. What have they got? CV3 here. Americans are also considering a base on Venus. And they can build it with this one, but it's going to take 2 trips for it to be useful, because it'll be all the capacity just to build a base, and then they have to go back to Earth to get resources to build a facility. And I think that's a tight squeeze. I think they'd rather just stay and explore. The base on Venus can probably wait until next decade. American stuff here. Well, they have their CV5, which needs to return to base to be useful. This CV4, so what are we doing? We just said we're going to head out to Jupiter, and it's going to take 1 ore and 1 supply. And there's a fuel and a supply there, so we're good. And there's only that to refurbish the resupply the CV5. So that CV4 is loading up with those things, which will be used to build a small mining facility and heading back out to Jupiter. So it's in the 1 box. This American CV4, and I like to put the reserved ones on top because it's a little easier to remember. Oh, and it had a load of fuel, so now they've got tons of supplies. Yeah, supplies is not a problem for the Americans. Yeah, they've only got the 1 ore mining base, and that's actually here at the asteroid belt. But they can, and they can buy more supplies, and I guess they'll do it. So that's those guys over here, Enterprise. Well, what are they interested? They can go for EO, but Europa, I think, is maybe where they're going to go. The Shoemaker Orbiter is going to come into Jupiter, and we're going to roll for it. 72. That looks like all. This is a Russian, yeah. If there's ever a reprint of this game, I think changing up the back graphics just a little bit. I mean, it's important to note the reserve status, but having the crew vehicle size and the faction flag would also be really helpful. And maybe also the cargo capacity, because that's still valid. on the reserve side. American flyby stay, or doesn't stay, but we don't roll for movement. So I think we're good for the Americans. Russians, rovers, nothing here. It's gonna, okay, we got a CV3 here. What is it gonna do? Well, before we figure that out, let's figure out what's going on out here. They've got a CV4 mining for fuel, one for supplies. We know this crewed vehicle is no longer useful at the Jupiter system, so it's going to head back there. They would like to get that mission accomplished, crewed vehicle exploration at Callisto. The Russians, they've got ore. They can sell some ore. How much ore can they sell? They can sell 4 ore. They might just want more ore. Or they can go back and try to get that Callisto mission, because 6, 7, 8. Well, the guy who's coming back will be able to go back. I think we'll risk. I think they're just going to come over here with the Asians and collect some ore. I don't see any other Russian movement there or here. No orbiters. Okay, that looks like all the movement. Explorations, starting with the Russians. Russian rover on Venus. So 4 + 1 is 5, + 3 is 8. That's a success, no malfunction. Venus is physics. Russian got a 5. And that's, so we'll just take a note here. So that's a depletion. That's probably, the Americans are doing very well this turn. They've got 5, 6, 10, 11 political markers and 2 missions. The Russians, this is going to be their first political marker. The Asians have 4. So to look at the chits, it doesn't look terrible. That's helping the Russians a little bit. Anyway, they're getting a political marker. Venus is now a 0. Rover does not have a a spectrometer. So we're going to pull 1 world card. Now this is where the Russians could say, if they pull something valid, but they didn't, they got subterranean water, which is icy. If the Russians, saying, we're behind and we're not going to use Venus, we could get rid of the volcanoes. If they had pulled another valid card and make it less enticing to other people. I think that's a hard, certainly playing 3-player solo, that's a hard assessment for me to make. So in general, I have been just kind of picking the best ones that's good for somebody without much thought to factional preferences. Life check on Venus, because otherwise Ron will get me. 15, no life. I appreciate you, Ron. Next up for the Russians. Okay, that's an exploration. Other explorations. That's a mining. That's a mining. There's no other Russian stuff. No Russians here, no Russians, no Russians. Uranus. That's a 3. They're still going to go after this one. So it's going to be a 7. Trying to get a world card there. 45, no malfunction. 10, no exploration. Next up for the Russians, they have a flyby. Then go engineering. Nope, that says engineering, but it's actually physics. This one is engineering. Okay, physics, engineering, physics. Well, I guess I'll just go with the, let's see here, 3 plus 1 is 4. They'll just go for the guaranteed, and that's actually a 12. Or do they want more engineering? I think they'll go for the physics. Or actually, we're going to go for engineering. Okay, all over the place here. So 4 and 4 is 8, plus 1 for the bonus, 9. 27, they're okay. 2 is a success. That is in engineering. I got a 1. Flyby needs to make an engine check. That's fine. And it's off to the Kuiper belt. That looks like all of the Russians' explorations. I felt like they had more robotic explorers. I guess got that one in transit. We did 1, 2, that's 3, and 4. So yeah, that's all I've got. Okay, next up, Americans. Pathfinder rover 7 plus 6 is 13. $80 and a 7, so that is 1 engineering marker pull, no malfunction. 1 point for the Americans. Next up, their crewed vehicle. That's a 6. Oh no, crewed vehicle is done. Well, they can do a resource mining then in a minute. Of course, there's no explorations there. I had a 0 marker. Oh, it's right there, I guess. Okay, they have their orbiter and they have the Enterprise. Let's start off with the Enterprise. Actually, let's start off with the orbiter. Orbiter is going to target Europa. So that's a 4, 8, 9, 10, minus 1. Looking at a 9, that's a success, no malfunction. That's a biology marker for Europa. It's a 3, so a depletion, earning the Americans another political marker. So we're just doing a little political marker shuffle. Puts them at 12. Europa gets reduced from a 4 to a not a 5. That orbiter has a spectrometer, so 2 world cards. And the world card, mixed ice, and cratered surface. Europa is an icy rocky, so they are both valid. The mixed ice and the existing water ice. Yeah. I think we stick with the water ice. Life check, 14%. Printed on Europa plus 4 more, 18%. This would be a nice 79. No life signs. Next up, so that was the orbiter. The Enterprise is a 8 plus 3, 11, and he gets to roll 2 dice, 2 red dice. 61, no recall, and it was 10 and a 4, so they did not get the second biology marker, but they do get one. And lucky again, 3 political marker, 3 is reduced to a 2, 1 world card. Subterranean water. Well, that makes that even more better. It makes it better for supplies. Just a tick down on, yeah, I think they're going to go for the subterranean water. So now that life check is plus 5%. So that's a 19% chance. $26. Okay. Do we see anything else for the Americans here? They got those two. They've got this flyby and a rover. Let's go with the rover first. So 6 plus 7, 13. $26 and a 4, so a single biology marker, which is a 2. And the flyby will also target here. 4 plus 3 is 7. I guess they would prefer to do this one. 4 plus 5, 9. That's a success, no malfunction. Let's do the engine check. That's good. Okay, so we're pulling a biology marker for Titan. It's a 1. And the flyby moves on. Done those. This flyby at Neptune. They're going to go for Neptune proper. Just see if I can get a world card. 5 and 5, 10. Automatic success. But a 2% is a malfunction. So they're getting the physics marker and then an engineering marker. Physics was a 1, engineering a 3. And that flyby is out. Orbiter at Sedna. They've completed their mission. They're just trying to, get more points. So that's a 3 plus 7. Automatic success, malfunction roll. 53, and that's physics. We're getting low on the physics markers. 1. Looks like there's still 5 of them in there. All right, next up, Asians. Nothing, nothing, nothing. That's mining. All right, that's gonna mine, but these guys are exploring. So CV5 at EO is a 7 plus 4 is 11. So they got a 6, so they don't get the second marker, and they rolled an 11, so that is a recall. EO is physics, so they're getting a physics marker and then a biology marker. Physics is a 3, so that, let's finish off the biology. That's a depletion on EO. Biology is a 2. Asians are going to get a political marker. EO is flipping over to 0. CV got recalled. World card pull. Rocky volcanic moon. Just doing a shuffle. And the world card pull is S-class asteroid. So that's not going to be valid. And EO's locked in with the escarpments. Life check 4%. No life. Next up, the orbiter. I think the orbiter is going to target Europa. So it's a 3. That one gives a spectrometer bonus, which is not going to help. So that's a 3 plus 2 is 5 minus 1, 4. I think instead they're going to go for engineering. So 3 plus 5 is 8 minus 1, 7. 7 for the Trojans and Greeks. That's a success, but a 16. And their malfunction is 18. So an engineering marker for the Trojans and Greeks, and then another one for the orbiter malfunction. First one's a 3 though. They got a depletion. Next one, a 1. All right, well, depletion is another political marker. Trojans and Greeks right now is a 5, so we need a 4 marker. Icy rocky asteroids. Give you a view. I love the artwork there on Jupiter. Nope. We pulled hydrogen, so not valid for the asteroids. Life check, we said 4%. $42, no life. And that orbiter is removed. That's going to mine. They've got a rover, orbiter, and a probe. Well, I guess the probe. Now, I'm not sure if I understood this correctly. There was a discussion on the Geek, and maybe we need to clarify. I know this. So this comes into like probes. I guess it was in the context of the question on the Geek, I think, was the probe was on a flyby in the flyby box. Once it gets to the flyby box, the probe, I believe, can be deployed to any of these items. And we already know that the flyby can target any of these at no penalty from the flyby box. So I think that's the case with the probe. An orbiter with a probe here. I think the probe can only go to Saturn. I don't know if on the turn that the orbiter arrives, could it decline to move and deploy the probe anywhere? I'm not sure. Those are kind of some corner cases. Anyway, we're just going to go for the probe right on Saturn. Keep it simple. 11 plus 2, 13. No malfunction, check required. Got the 4, so only the single physics. And it's a 1. Rover at Titan, 6 plus 5 is 11. Four, so only the 1 marker. 34, no malfunction. Titan is biology. Pulse of 2. Takes care of those. Flyby from Uranus. Let's mix it up. It's a 3, and we'll go for Oberon. 3 and 5, 8. One is a success, but that's a 00 cocked, so that's going to be a malfunction. No, it's not true. Yes, it is. It's a malfunction, not an engine check. So a successful exploration engineering at Oberon. And it's also not true. I was going to say, if I roll the 0, that would be a 100. So it's a 2 on the engineering pull. So let me finish. We'll roll the other black die. See, look at that. 0. That's a 100. There is no malfunction. And we get a 44 on the engine check, so the flyby keeps trucking. Flyby here. It's a 4. Yeah, let's go for this Neptune. 4, 9. We got the 7, no malfunction. This is physics. I got a 1. And the engine check is another 100. And it heads out to the Kuiper belt. And that looks like all of our exploration. Remote mining. I know there is some. But we'll start off with the Russians. Right here at Vesta. So 5 plus 2, 7. And they get to subtract 1 from their red die. They've got a 3, 91, so they're getting 2 ore. No recall. Next up for the Russians, they've got a couple here. They'll do the fuel, that's an 11. So 31. Their recall rate is 25, so they're good. The only thing we're really looking for on the red die in this case is a 1 or 2, because of their -1. So they're guaranteed the 2, and then they might get a 3. Next up, here, going for supplies, which is now a 9. They got 8 and a 16, so that is 2 supplies and a recall. 2 supplies, recall, and a biology marker. Biology is a 3. is all of the Russians' remote mining. Next up, the Americans. They'll do it here at Venus. Why not? Do they want more fuel or ore? Fuel's a 9, ore's a 7. Don't know what they're going to do with it exactly. They're just going to haul it back to Earth, probably. They'll go for the. They're going to go for the ore, actually. No, I guess we'll go with the numbers. 9. Go ahead and make it worthwhile. So going for fuel. They have a 2 and a 96, so they get 2 fuel. Put on there. Next up for the Americans, they're not doing this one. And they may not have any. They do not. That's it for them. Asians coming along. Ore here at Vesta. 7. They got an 8, so they're only getting the 1 ore. No recall. And they're going to do fuel. That's the 11. 49, no recall, and 2 fuel. Don't think I see anything else there. That looks like all of the mining. Next up, trade and base construction. Again, we're going to continue to defer these trades right now. That's it. The Asians were trying to get a bunch of fuel to haul to Mars. Okay. For more money, I think the Americans will. I mean, they've got tons of supply. Their ore is a little bit, but they're just mine. No, they didn't just mine. It was the Russians who just mined a bunch of ore. So the Americans are a little short. If they're thinking about a large defense network, I think they'll pass on the defense network and maybe just go ahead and build a settlement. Go ahead and get this built up just a little more. It's got a 4 on the backside. And nothing here. Russians not building a settlement. Now, interesting, Vostok. Vostok is their Mars base. They're in a position. Oh boy, I just knocked that. I think it was on a 4. I'll try to remember to check that video, but I think they just went from a 4 to a 5. And I think I was working on that before. Yeah, they were on a 5. Okay, so they've gone to 5. That was the whole point of bringing that fuel. Okay, here. So they're at 5 on Mars. And they're going to go to 5. Two, 2, and 1. Okay. So, and they've got 13 out at Mars, but 5 at the asteroid belt. Americans are 5 at Mars, 4 at the asteroid belt. They're 5 at Mars, 3 at the asteroid belt, and 3 at Earth. That looks like it for the turn. We're at 40 minutes. Let's go ahead and get another turn in here in a minute. Okay, build phase for 2106. Starting with the Asians, they're going to get buy a LV2 and a telescope. So everybody right now is 2 over their support limit for robotic explorers. This one will make them 3 over. So we'll see how that works out for them. The Americans are spending a fuel and a supply to ready the Endeavour, and the Russians don't have any builds. That's the builds. On to movement. So Russian CV5 arrives back at the asteroid belt. Well, we're taking care of Russian orbiter and probe. American CV arrive at Jupiter. Nothing here. Sorry about that. Front door. We were doing transfer box movements. So these flybys arrive, Russian and Asian. It looks like all of the transfer box movement. Next up, Asian movement. So what are the Asians up to? Well, that crewed vehicle 3 is going to stay there and try mining more ore. They can bring the ore back, sell it at the asteroid belt base. This crewed vehicle, their crewed vehicle 4s are actually their best explorers. So they're going to head out to Jupiter and try to pick up a little more exploration. This crewed vehicle, CV5, their 5 is not quite as good of an explorer. From EO, heading back to the asteroid belt. And I think that's all of the Asians' movement except for launching the LV2 telescope. 78 rocket is recovered, and the telescope, put it up here in Earth orbit. Yep, don't think I have. And we didn't say anything that CV4 is at Jupiter and is going to continue to mine some fuel. Next up are the Americans. I think the Americans this turn are actually going to have this CV3 head on to Mercury and do some exploration there. So that's 1 year. Okay, so the Americans have a CV5 and a CV4. Well, the CV4 is going to load up with 7 supplies. And head out to Jupiter to build a base. And I'm just going to put the 7, now I'm going to stack it on the ship. That's been a problem before. So the Andromeda heading out to Jupiter. And so is the, let's see here, where is the other? Okay, the Enterprise is already out here. Yeah, the Americans, let's see here, just doing a little calculation. So what am I thinking about? Well, the Americans are considering making a military push, going for an embargo. They've got a lot of political markers, so they can afford to put a lot of political points. They could try to get initiative. They can push to move people to an embargo. They're at neutral with the Russians, and they're 2 steps up with the Asians. if they want to do that, so we talked about what that might look like a turn or two ago. They want to have their crewed vehicles, both their CV5s, one at Mars, one at the asteroid belt, and they need to be ready. If they send this crewed vehicle out to Jupiter right now, it would arrive in 7, but then they also need to be back. So I don't think there's anything it could do if it goes to Jupiter. So the question then becomes, what would it do in the meantime? There's no exploration to be done anywhere, so it becomes obvious if they move it to Mars. And other players would take note of moving the military ship to a destination where it wouldn't seem to serve any other purpose. So that's an interesting situation. They could send it to Mercury, but Mercury that's a 5 distance. That's a 3-year trip. And then, so there's nothing obvious to do right now with it other than leave it here. So I guess the Americans are going to leave it at the Freedom Base. So that's an interesting gameplay perspective. Your military ships are great explorers, but if you don't use them to go explore, then people will begin to wonder what it is that you're doing with them. So let's see here. What other American movement do we have? Well, this CV5, could always head back to, so from Jupiter to Mars, the distance is 4, which is a 2-year journey. And it needs to not be reserved. The Americans are going to go ahead and keep the CV there at Europa. Then they have their CV4, which is going to move here into Jupiter orbit to mine some fuel. And that's going to be all of the Americans' movement. Next up, the Russians. What have they got going on? Well, they have their reserved CV5 returning to base. They have an orbiter and a probe that need to move into Jupiter orbit, and they need to roll an engine check for that. 50, no problem. Yeah, I think with that situation, Americans are just going to go back and do the Americans. They're going to defer any kind of military auction this coming decade and go ahead and go for Jupiter. But they're thinking along the embargo lines. Maybe they'll go ahead and get the military policy tech, and that'll help them even further. Okay, other American movement, just flybys all the way out here. I feel like I might be missing, there's the CV5s, there's a CV4, Where's the other American CV4? Oh, it's on the way, and this one's there. Okay, we're all good. Russians, did we just do Russians? Yes. Okay, that's all the movement. Next up, explorations. So we will start with the Russians. They've got a rover at Venus. There's nothing left for it to explore. So there's absolutely nothing that they can do with this anymore. They'll just decommission it. That's going to mine. So there's no Russian exploration up to here, but now they've got a probe and an orbiter here at Jupiter. And actually, it's not great, but we're going to let them change that up. They've got a mission for Callisto, so they're going to go to Callisto and focus in on their mission. So they're going to use the probe first. That's a 10 plus 2 is 12. Callisto is biology. And they don't need to roll for a malfunction. They got a 5, so they just get the 1 biology marker. Which is a 1. Next up for the Russians. So I don't see any other exploring here or here. And so now we're just doing the Kuiper belt. They will target, they're a 4 plus. They'll go for the 7 at Haumea Makemake. So that will be an 11. No malfunction, they got a 10, so they just get the 1 physics marker, which is a 5. So that is a political marker for the Russians. Their second. That 7 is being reduced down to a 6. The world card is going to be water ice. Let's see here, how many? Icy rocky dwarf planet. Well, icy water ice applies. The question is, do they want it to? Or do they want to try to reserve it for? Yeah, they'll just take the water ice. Search for life, that modifies it, so it's up to 10% now. 10% life check. I got an 18, no life, and we need to do an engine check for the flyby. 45. The distance there is 3. That is a 2-year travel time. And so they've got a couple more explorations with that flyby, and then they'll let it go. What's next? That's all of the Russians. Americans, well, they've got their rover Pathfinder here on Mercury. 7 plus 6. 13. 50, no malfunction. They got a 2, so they do get 2 engineering markers. a 1, and a 1. Next up for the Americans, got their CV5 and their orbiter here. Let's do the Enterprise first. No, let's do the Shoemaker first. That is 4, plus 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8, minus 1 for satellite world, 7. I got a 10 and a 38, so no success, no malfunction. Enterprise is an 8, plus 2, 10. Automatic success. Roll for recall. 76. No recall. Biology marker for Europa. Man, they are just nailing it. 5. And I was actually, well, I was going to say I was supposed to roll 2 red dice, but there weren't any red dice to roll that time. So that's a political marker for the Americans. And we are reducing the 2 down to a 1. Pulling a world card. Which is silicate rocks. It could apply, but they don't want it to. Life check is still at 19%. Well, it's an 80-something. All right. So that is that's both of those. The Endeavour, you know, that stuff up there is in the transit box. And this guy is mining. So rover, 6 plus 7. Another 13. And this is still biology. A 2 means they get 2 biology markers, but they also rolled a 17. So that is going to be a malfunction and a 3rd biology marker. So first 2 are a 1 and a 1 and a 3rd for the sorry, it's not a biology. This is a rover, engineering marker. Okay, a 2. And this rover is done. Next up, American Flyby is a 4. And they'll go for the physics. So 4 plus 5, 9. It's a 1, so it is a success. It's also a 13, so it's a malfunction, and they will get an engineering. That was the last physics marker, which was a 1, and the engineering is also a 1. So the Americans have been doing well, but their robotic explorers are fading now. So they're down to the orbiter, 1, 2 orbiters, and a rover. So that now they are within their support limits. Next up, orbiter, it's Sedna. And this is going to be for physics. I'm sure it'll make it. So I'll probably have to pause and total everybody's physics. It's a 3 + 7, 10, yeah, automatic success on physics. So just rolling for the malfunction. 71. All right, I'm gonna total everybody's physics up. You can see where they're at. Those are the Asians, the Russians, and the Americans. Be right back. Okay, so the numbers for everybody. Russia and Asia both had 23, and America had 26. So the numbers were close. Here is the pull for the Americans' Sedna orbiter. And they got lucky, a 5. So that's another political marker. Okay, the 7 goes down to a 6. Do a world card. World card, pull C-class asteroid, minimal gravity. Well, Sedna does have minimal gravity, so they'll stick that out there. And the life check is 5%. No, life. Okay, that is the Americans. Lastly, we have the Asians. So of course they do have the telescope. Got to remember that. They will target the deep space astronomy location. That's an 8, halved to 4, and then the telescope itself is 1 plus 2 more, so a 7. They got an 8, so no success and no malfunction. Next, for the Asians, they don't have anything right now going on. No explorations in Jupiter. Saturn, however, rover is a 6 plus 5, 11. (41) no malfunction, 10, so they just get the single biology marker. And we're running low on biology too. Biology markers, that is. They pulled a 1. And the orbiter here. Sorry, I was just kind of noticing the glare. Okay, the orbiter is a 5. They're going to go for Titan and the biology. So that's 10 minus 1, 9. A 7 is a success. 17, that's a malfunction. So they're getting a biology marker, which is a 2, and an engineering marker. A 1. And the orbiter comes off. Flyby at Neptune. It's a 3 plus 5 or 5, either way. I guess I'll just go for Neptune proper. 3 and 5, 8. 8 for physics. A success, no malfunction. They got a 1. Flyby needs to make an engine check roll. That's fine. And this flyby will target, uh-oh, I am missing now. Is it possible? I think this one got applied, not from a depletion, but we had a random event early on. Is it possible that we just have left that as a 7? I was just thinking, I don't see a loose marker. It's possible. I'm just going to play it as it stands. So they'll target the Kuiper belt. So it's a 7, and the flyby is it's a 4, so that's 11. I got a 3, so only the one physics marker. 80 is no malfunction. Physics is a 1. Engine check. 93. And it's out there. And that's all of the explorations. Okay. Space mining starting with the Russians. This location 7 ore with they get -1 on their red die. They rolled a 4, so they're going to recall, and a 10 -1 is still, so just 1 ore. Crewed vehicle is going to flip, and they're going to earn a biology marker. Down to, or it's a 1, and there's a couple of chits left. Next up for the Russians. Did we screw up this movement? I think we did. This guy was mining, so we just missed this movement for the Russians. So we'll go ahead and let them correct their movement and head back to the asteroid belt. So, but they are going to do resource mining here at Jupiter. $27, that's not a recall. A 10 just means they get 2 fuel. And they are full. There's no other Russian stuff. Americans, they're not mining down here anymore. They're not mining here. But they are going to mine right here at Jupiter with that CV4. 81, red one was cocked. 10, so 2 fuel for the Americans. And play a little Jenga game. Okay. That guy was exploring. That's all the Americans, and now the Asians. Crewed vehicle at Vesta. No recall. They rolled an 8, so just 1 ore again. Asian crewed vehicle here at Jupiter. It's a 2 and a 17, so that's 2 fuel. But they flip. And earn a biology marker. And now we're down to, I got a 2, and now we're down to 1 biology marker. Okay, so if the Asians are trying to maximize, just thinking this out, the plan was for this crewed vehicle to return back to the Mars base and sell fuel at Mars. Mars only has 1 right now, so that would give them 5. They could sell up to 10. It may be worth buying an LV-4 and just launching 4 fuel and being happy with 9. So I think that's probably what they'll do. Now the question I have is, what's the travel time? AR-4, it's a 3-year journey, so that's 3, 2, 1. Ooh, they have misplayed that. Right, 5 to 1, 4. It's a 3-year journey for the Asians with their speed tech, which would mean next turn be in the Mars 3 box, 2 box, 1 box. They don't get there. So they may just buy it on Earth and see if they get lucky with the LV-4. Okay. Trade and base construction. Well, we were just talking trade a little bit. The Russians, I mean, they can execute that or selling this one whenever they want. Same thing with the Americans. I guess we're just kind of waiting to the end of the decade for buying. So that's the situation. So nobody's going to execute any of those trades. Base construction. So the Americans, this is the Freedom Base, right? So they certainly, well, they don't have a whole lot of spare fuel. They've got the 1 fuel here. So if they build a settlement, now the advantage to building a settlement means that they would be able to buy 6 supplies instead of the 4 where they're currently at. Supplies aren't a problem, and they have 2 bases that mine supplies. But they will be out of fuel. The question is, are they doing anything? I mean, they're mining fuel. They've got some fuel here that they'll be able to bring back. And they don't have any other reserved CVs. And they can always just ship it from Earth. Well, I think they'll defer right now. There's no pressure. I don't think they have a lot of builds that they want to do here, so they can just hold off. Russians, what are they doing? Same situation, but they actually need this fuel at the asteroid belt to get that crewed vehicle ready, and in fact they're going to be short because they've got 2 crewed vehicles here and only 1 fuel right now, although they are going to be bringing 6 back. But I think, and they can build another settlement on Mars whenever they want. And so they'll just hold off. Same thing, the Asians. They actually, well, they don't have very much fuel, but of course now they're not going to sell that fuel. They can bring the fuel that they've just been mining back to the asteroid belt and build these settlements up a little more. So they've got enough there for 3 builds if they want to take it all the way to, 8 settlements. they want to also sell ore. Right now they can sell 6, and they've only got 2. So do they want the settlements, the next settlement level more, or do they want to make money more? I think the money probably is a better deal for them. So we're not going to worry about pushing forward on the settlements. Okay, so that helps clarify that. So that is the end of the turn, and we are over in, yeah. So I think that's where we are leaving it. We've got 3 turns left in the decade. Things are kind of speeding, well, sort of speeding up for us. And I think the Americans have decided not to push for a embargo situation in the coming decade. If they can set that up so it's not and not telegraph that, maybe they can build up and be, get a tech push and be ready to maybe try a military play in the next decade. I think they'll go for that. So we've got a general outline. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.